Raphael was sitting in one of his favorite restaurants in the heart of the city, a sophisticated place where he often found solace to reflect on his business ventures while enjoying a gourmet meal. At just 29, Raphael was already one of the most respected entrepreneurs in the region, known for his extraordinary ability to turn opportunities into million-dollar enterprises. As the owner of several real estate companies and hundreds of properties, Raphael appeared to have everything a person could desire. Yet, the void left by an absent family and the haunting memories of his past still lingered in the shadows of his seemingly perfect life. That day, as he savored an exquisite dish and pondered the challenges of his next big investment, something unexpected caught his eye. Across the wide glass window that separated the elegant restaurant from the bustling street, he noticed a woman sitting on the pavement. Her disheveled hair and worn-out clothes contrasted sharply with the upscale surroundings. She silently held out her hand, hoping for help as people hurried past her without a second glance. Intrigued by the strange sense of familiarity that washed over him, Raphael glanced away momentarily, trying to place where he had seen her before. Unable to shake the feeling, he quickly paid his bill and left the restaurant, his curiosity growing. Approaching the woman with cautious steps, unsure of how to start the conversation, he gently asked, "What's your name?" The woman looked up with tired eyes and responded in a quiet voice, Deborah Santana." The name echoed in Raphael's mind like a distant memory. A chill ran down his spine as he realized who stood before him. Deborah, his old schoolmate, the girl he had secretly been in love with. But now, she was a far cry from the lively, joyful image he had held in his memory. Trying to process the shock, Raphael swallowed hard. "Are you Marcella's daughter?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. Deborah nodded, confirming what Raphael could scarcely believe. She explained that she had come to the city from the countryside in search of opportunities, but things hadn't gone as planned. After her mother Marcella passed away, Deborah had struggled to support herself and had been evicted from her home. Raphael, now deeply concerned, asked where she had lived. When Deborah revealed that she had been staying in the Estrella building, Raphael felt his throat tighten. The Estrella building was one of the many properties he owned, part of his vast real estate empire. The realization that he was indirectly responsible for her eviction hit him like a ton of bricks. Guilt began to gnaw at him as he reflected on the unseen consequences of his business dealings, something he had never considered on such a personal level before. Though Raphael tried to hide his shock and guilt, he couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility for Deborah's plight. Immediately, he offered to help, inviting her to stay at his home so she would have a safe place to rest. Deborah, hesitant at first, ultimately accepted, driven by necessity and the lingering trust she still felt toward Raphael, despite all the years that had passed. On the way to his mansion, Raphael made an unexpected stop at an upscale clothing store. He realized that Deborah needed more than just a roof over her head. She needed her dignity restored. As they walked through the store, Raphael helped her pick out new clothes. Embarrassed but grateful, Deborah carefully chose simple pieces, concerned about not overspending. Noticing her hesitation, Raphael insisted she take whatever she needed, knowing it was the least he could do for someone in such a vulnerable position. Deborah eventually chose a few basic, comfortable items, while Raphael added accessories and personal care products to ensure she had everything she needed to feel better. As they shopped, their conversation naturally drifted to the past. Deborah shared her struggles to find work and how her life spiraled downward after her mother's death. Raphael listened intently, absorbing each detail with a growing sense of sadness and determination. He wanted to do more than just give her shelter and clothing. He wanted to be a positive force in her life. When they finally arrived at his mansion, Deborah was visibly awed by the luxury and grandeur of the place. Raphael showed her to the guest room and handed her the new clothes. Overwhelmed by his generosity, Deborah expressed her heartfelt thanks and excused herself to take a much-needed shower. As the warm water cascaded over her skin for the first time in months, Deborah felt a fleeting but profound sense of relief, almost as if a forgotten part of her humanity had been restored. While Deborah bathed, Raphael sat in the living room, lost in thought. He couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling of responsibility for how her life had turned out. When Deborah returned, refreshed and sitting beside him, they began talking about their school days. Blushing slightly, Raphael admitted that he had always been in love with her, but had never found the courage to confess it. To his surprise, Deborah shyly revealed that she had felt the same, but had never believed someone like Raphael would ever notice a girl like her. Their conversation grew deeper as they opened up about their emotions and fears. Deborah spoke about the harsh realities she faced after losing her mother and how her financial struggles had led her to live on the streets. Raphael listened quietly, reflecting on the fragility of life and how the decisions he made in his business had real consequences for people like Deborah. For the first time, he apologized, not just for the eviction, but for the part he had unknowingly played in her hardship. In that moment, Raphael realized that his success, vast wealth, and power meant little if he couldn't use them to help others, especially those who had once meant so much to him. The reunion with Deborah stirred something deep within him, leading him to reconsider not only his past, but the future he wanted to create, for her, for himself, and for all those whose lives he had the ability to change. Despite all the challenges Deborah had faced, she displayed a surprising strength and told Raphael that she didn't blame him. She understood that the circumstances were beyond their control. That night, Raphael made a decision that would change the course of his life. He no longer wanted to just help Deborah. He wanted to do something bigger. He realized that his success could be directed toward a more noble purpose, and it was time for a new chapter in his life. The unexpected encounter with Deborah had awakened him to a reality he could no longer ignore. He was determined to use his resources and influence to help those in need. Life at Raphael's mansion slowly settled into a rhythm. The luxury and tranquility of the place were a stark contrast to what Deborah had been used to, and she was still adjusting to the new routine, trying to find her place in this world so different from the cold streets where she had been only a few weeks ago. Raphael did everything he could to make her feel at home, but he knew that despite all the comfort, the scars of her time on the streets wouldn't fade easily. Raphael felt torn. The guilt over Deborah's eviction still haunted him, and the image of her being forced to leave the Estrella building, one of his properties, because of his business decisions was always present in his mind. He tried to make amends by offering everything he could: support, a safe home, and most importantly, his company. Having her near again filled him with undeniable happiness, but there was a shadow that he couldn't fully dispel. Deborah, for her part, was grateful to have a place to stay, but adapting to this new life wasn't easy. The trauma of the days and nights she spent on the streets still weighed heavily on her. She found it hard to relax, as though she might lose everything again at any moment. The nights were the worst, when the sounds of the city invaded the mansion, bringing back uncomfortable memories of the alleys where she had once sought refuge. Raphael noticed the shadows in Deborah's eyes, but wasn't sure how to dispel them. In an attempt to understand her better, Raphael discreetly began investigating Deborah's past. He learned more about her mother Marcella and the struggles they had faced before moving to the big city. Marcella, a hard-working and determined woman, had left the countryside hoping to give Deborah a better future. However, the city was not always kind. When Marcella fell ill, their situation deteriorated rapidly, and a young Deborah was forced to take on responsibilities far beyond her years. Raphael realized that Deborah had never had a true support network. Now, he knew he had to fill that role, but the pressure of not disappointing her was immense. He wanted to help her find a sense of purpose again, knowing that offering her shelter wasn't enough. Deborah was strong, but she needed more than just a roof over her head. She needed to rebuild her life. One rainy afternoon, Raphael and Deborah sat together in the living room, the soft sound of the rain tapping against the windows creating an introspective atmosphere. Deborah, still somewhat reserved, began to open up about her recent experiences, sharing the difficulties of finding work and the constant sense of insecurity she felt while living on the streets. "I had to keep one eye open even when I slept," Deborah said, her voice quiet as she stared into the distance. "You never know what might happen. Anything can happen at any time. There's no rest." Raphael listened in silence, a knot forming in his chest. He wished he could erase all of Deborah's painful memories, but he knew that was impossible. All he could do now was offer her a better present and future. Later that evening, while Deborah took a shower, Raphael found himself organizing his old office in the mansion. He opened an old drawer filled with mementos from his adolescence, things he hadn't touched in years. Among yellowing papers and forgotten objects, he found an envelope with his name scrawled in the corner. Raphael recognized the envelope immediately. It was a letter he had written to Deborah back in their school days, but had never had the courage to give her. With his heart pounding, Raphael opened the envelope and reread the letter. In it, he confessed his feelings for Deborah, expressing how he had been in love with her, but had never managed to tell her, afraid of rejection or damaging their friendship. The innocent and sincere words of his younger self made him smile and sigh, remembering how everything seemed both simple and complicated at the same time back then. Raphael held the letter for a few minutes, contemplating whether or not to show it to Deborah. He knew the contents weren't anything too serious, but still, revealing his past feelings might complicate what they were trying to rebuild. However, something inside him told him that Deborah deserved to know what he had felt for so long. When Deborah returned to the living room, Raphael was sitting with the envelope in his hand, clearly nervous. "Deborah," he began hesitantly, "I found something I wanted to show you. Actually, it's something I should have shown you years ago." Deborah looked at him, curious. He handed her the letter and watched as she carefully opened it, reading the words written by a younger Raphael. As Deborah read, her expression shifted between surprise and emotion, and Raphael couldn't predict how she would react. After a few minutes of silence, Deborah looked up, a shy smile appearing on her lips. "I had no idea," she said softly, the words of the letter still resonating in her mind. "I've always been terrible at expressing my feelings," Raphael admitted, embarrassed. "That's why I never gave you the letter. I thought it was better to leave things as they were." Deborah held the letter to her chest for a moment, absorbing the significance of it. She confessed that she, too, had felt something for him back then, but had never had the courage to reveal it. They both laughed at how foolish they had been as teenagers, so close yet unable to open up to each other. The letter became an unexpected point of connection between them, bringing old feelings to the surface, but also offering a common ground on which to build something new. Deborah, her eyes now shining with renewed warmth, thanked Raphael for keeping the letter all these years, saying it meant a lot to her, especially now. Their time together at the mansion gave both Raphael and Deborah the unique opportunity to get to know each other again, not just as the schoolmates they once were, but as two individuals shaped by their life experiences. For Raphael, it was a chance to learn about the importance of his business decisions and the impact they could have on people's lives. For Deborah, it was the beginning of a journey to rediscover her strength and find a new purpose in life. Inspired by his reunion with Deborah and determined to make a difference, Raphael decided to embark on an ambitious plan to create a social program focused on helping the homeless. His vision was to provide shelter, food, and opportunities for reintegration, helping people rebuild their lives, just as Deborah was doing. Raphael knew he had the financial resources and the influence to make this project a reality, but he quickly realized that the road ahead would be more challenging than he had anticipated. From the outset, he faced resistance from some of his investors and business partners, who feared that the project might negatively impact his lucrative real estate ventures. They argued that Raphael's public image could be tarnished if he became involved in controversial social issues like homelessness. Some even worried that the value of Raphael's properties could decrease if shelters were established near residential areas. In addition to internal challenges, the media quickly began questioning Raphael's motives. Some suggested that the project was merely an attempt to improve his public image after revelations about Deborah's eviction from the Estrella building. Others speculated that Raphael was trying to atone for a past filled with controversial business decisions. The headlines were relentless, and the criticism started to affect Raphael more than he would have liked to admit. Observing the situation, Deborah offered to help with the project. She believed that her personal experience could contribute in a meaningful way, helping Raphael better understand the needs of the homeless community. As Deborah became more deeply involved in the project, she faced prejudice from some of the people connected to it. Investors and consultants often looked at her with distrust, questioning her ability to contribute in a meaningful way. Her past on the streets seemed like a stigma she could never escape. During one meeting, an investor made a cutting remark. "With all due respect, Raphael, do you really think someone who lived on the streets has the experience needed to handle such a complex project?" He threw a skeptical glance toward Deborah. Deborah, feeling the sting of the comment, kept her composure, but Raphael saw the pain in her eyes. He tried to defend her, but soon realized that his words wouldn't be enough to change the minds of those who had already decided to discredit her contribution. As these situations became more frequent, the tension between Raphael and Deborah grew, creating a rift of insecurity and frustration. Their relationship began to suffer under the external pressure. Raphael was constantly caught between trying to balance the interests of the project with the expectations of his investors, while Deborah felt increasingly isolated and undervalued. At home, the once natural flow of conversation between them became strained and filled with misunderstandings. Deborah felt that, despite Raphael's support, he couldn't fully understand the emotional toll she carried, being constantly judged for her past. One day, after a particularly difficult meeting, Raphael and Deborah had an intense argument. Exhausted from constantly proving her worth, Deborah voiced her frustration. "I know you want to help, Raphael, but it feels like no one here really believes I can make a difference. It's as if my past on the streets is a burden I'll never be able to leave behind." Raphael tried to calm her down, but his words sounded hollow in that moment. "Deborah, I'm really trying, I am. But you have to understand, convincing these people isn't easy. They're used to seeing the world in a very different way," he explained. "And why do I have to convince them?" Deborah responded, tears in her eyes. "I shouldn't have to prove every single moment that I deserve to be here. Do you have any idea how exhausting that is?" Raphael fell silent, feeling powerless. He knew Deborah was right, but he didn't have an immediate solution to offer. The pressure of balancing his feelings for her, his desire to do good, and the constant barriers from the investors were starting to take a toll on him. In that moment, Raphael realized that he needed a new approach. He could no longer try to please everyone at once. Losing Deborah's trust was not an option. He had to make a clear decision about the path he wanted to take and how to face the challenges ahead. Determined to change course, Raphael called a meeting with his key investors and partners. He presented the social project once again, this time emphasizing not only the humanitarian reasons, but also the long-term benefits for the community and the businesses involved. Raphael used data and research to show that helping the homeless could reduce crime rates and improve social welfare, which could indirectly increase the value of properties in the region. He also made sure to highlight Deborah's role in the project, speaking about her experience and her unique ability to offer perspectives that no one else could. Raphael firmly stated that the project would not succeed without the contributions Deborah could provide, and made it clear that he was willing to move forward with, or without the support of those who continued to underestimate her. As Deborah watched the presentation, she felt a mixture of relief and pride. Raphael was finally using his voice and influence to defend her in a clear and decisive way. There was still a long road ahead, but he had shown that he was fully committed to the project, and more importantly to her. Though challenges remained, Raphael and Deborah's relationship began to grow stronger once again. They realized that to overcome adversity, they needed to stand united and trust one another, not just as partners in the project, but as friends and possibly life companions. The social project became a symbol of their journey, a joint effort not only to help others but also to redefine their own lives and values. Each step was a choice, each challenge an opportunity for growth. Together, Raphael and Deborah were learning to face their fears, insecurities, and the complex reality of their intertwined worlds. Deborah, determined to make a difference, threw herself even more into the project. She wasn't just doing it for herself, but for all those still suffering on the streets. During her visits to the shelters Raphael was helping to establish, Deborah reunited with familiar faces from her past, former neighbors and acquaintances from the Estrella building. These were people, like her, who had been forced to leave their homes and found themselves without a roof over their heads. Reuniting with these people stirred a flood of emotions in Deborah. She encountered Dona Lucia, an elderly woman who had always treated her like a daughter, now weakened and without hope. She also ran into Tiago, a young man who, like her, had been evicted and was now struggling to survive on the streets. Seeing these people reignited a sense of responsibility in Deborah, pushing her to pressure Raphael to speed up the project's implementation. Raphael, we need to act now. We can't wait any longer. There are people out there I've known since childhood who helped me when I needed it the most, Deborah urged, her words filled with unwavering determination. Raphael agreed, but knew the situation was more complicated. He was still facing resistance from investors and bureaucratic hurdles that come with a project of this magnitude. Yet, Deborah's passion and conviction motivated him to search for alternatives, redoubling his efforts to make the project a reality as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Deborah also encountered old adversaries, people who had always doubted her and now took the opportunity to remind her of the difficulties she had faced. Among these uncomfortable encounters was Carla, a woman Deborah had known from the Estrella building who had always seen her as a rival. Now living on the streets, Carla didn't miss the chance to vent her bitterness. Well, look who it is, Deborah Santana, the girl who always thought she was better than everyone else. And now you want to help us? Carla sneered with sarcasm and resentment. Deborah tried to stay calm, explaining that she truly wanted to help everyone without exception, but Carla's words struck a deep chord. It was as though every step forward pulled her back into a place of pain and distrust, making her path even more difficult. Seeing how these encounters affected Deborah, Raphael found himself at a crossroads. He was also being pressured by his partners to either abandon the project or at least reduce his direct involvement. The consequences of his business decisions were becoming clearer, with potential financial losses and the risk of damaging his reputation in the corporate world. In a tense meeting with his partners, Raphael was cornered. Raphael, you need to decide. We can't continue like this. With this instability, you have to choose, Raphael. Either you continue with your business as usual, or you support this risky project and put everything we've built at risk, one of the partners said, clearly frustrated. Raphael knew the social project wasn't just important for Deborah, it was also vital for him. It represented a chance to redeem his past actions and do something truly meaningful. However, he was fully aware that this decision could radically alter the trajectory of his career. Later that day, Raphael found Deborah sitting in the mansion's garden, deep in thought, her gaze fixed on the horizon as if searching for answers to the questions that haunted her. I know it won't be easy, Deborah, Raphael said as he approached and sat beside her, but I'm here, and I'll do whatever it takes to support you in this project. Deborah looked at Raphael, acknowledging the weight of his words. She knew he was fighting his own battles, both internally and externally. The fact that he was willing to stand by her side meant the world to her. Thank you, Raphael. That's all I need right now, Deborah replied, gripping his hand firmly. After weeks of hard work, endless meetings, and overcoming numerous obstacles, the big day finally arrived. The inauguration of the homeless shelter. The building was pristine, equipped with new facilities, clean beds, and a kitchen ready to serve hot meals. Raphael and Deborah had poured their energy into ensuring everything was perfect. For them, this project was more than just a shelter. It was a symbol of hope, a new beginning for many people, including Deborah. On the day of the opening, the center was filled with guests, volunteers, community members, and some of the homeless individuals who would benefit from the project. The atmosphere was one of celebration and optimism. Raphael, dressed in a sharp suit, watched the movement around him with a subtle smile, proud of what they had accomplished. Beside him, Deborah was visibly emotional, her eyes shining with joy. However, amid the celebration, one of Raphael's advisors approached with a worried expression. Raphael, we need to talk now, he said, pulling him aside. Raphael immediately sensed that something was wrong. The advisor handed him a document, a formal notice informing them that the center was under investigation due to an anonymous complaint. The allegations cited misappropriation of funds and inadequate conditions for the residents. charges severe enough to threaten the center's future. A chill ran down Raphael's spine. He knew the accusations were false, but an investigation could delay or even shut down the project. He quickly shared the news with Deborah, who was stunned. The joy of the moment crumbled in seconds. "This can't be happening, Raphael. We worked so hard to get here," Deborah exclaimed, visibly shaken. Raphael tried to calm her, suggesting they hire lawyers and deal with the issue through the proper legal channels. "We'll resolve this the right way. We can defend ourselves," he said, trying to maintain his composure. But Deborah wasn't willing to wait. To her, this was a direct sabotage of the project, and she couldn't accept that someone was trying to destroy everything they had built with such effort. She felt an urgent need to find out who was behind the complaint and confront them directly. "No, Raphael, we can't just sit back and wait for the justice system to play out. We need to find out who's responsible. I'm going to investigate this myself," Deborah declared, her determination unmistakable. An intense debate followed. Raphael argued that acting impulsively could make the situation worse, while Deborah insisted they couldn't afford to sit idle, waiting for a resolution that might take too long. The tension between them grew, each clinging to their view of how to solve the problem. "Deborah, please trust me. I'll handle this the right way," Raphael urged, trying to appeal to the trust they had built. "And what if the right way is the wrong way, Raphael? What if there's no time to wait? These people need help now, not in months," Deborah shot back, her frustration evident. Determined to follow her instincts, Deborah began investigating on her own without Raphael's full support. She reached out to contacts from her time living in the Estrella building, trying to trace potential sources of the complaint. Using her sharp observation skills and network, Deborah uncovered clues suggesting the complaint might have been motivated by competitors of Raphael or even someone within his circle of investors who had opposed the project from the start. While Deborah delved deeper into her investigation, Raphael felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He knew Deborah was only trying to protect something she believed in wholeheartedly, but he feared her efforts could compromise the project further. The lack of alignment between them created a growing rift, and Raphael found himself questioning his approach. The following days were filled with uncertainty. Raphael and Deborah barely spoke, each immersed in their own strategies to save the shelter. The distance between them widened, and the future of the project seemed more uncertain with each passing day. Deborah made headway in her investigation, meeting with influential people in the community and arranging a meeting with an informant who might have information about the source of the complaint. Raphael, on the other hand, pressured his legal team to expedite the process and get a quick resolution to the accusations. It felt like a game of chess where every move had to be carefully calculated. Finally, Deborah uncovered a solid lead about the person behind the complaint, an old rival of Raphael in the real estate market. This competitor saw the project as an opportunity to undermine Raphael's reputation while advancing his own interests. Deborah shared her findings with Raphael, and although he was reluctant to admit it, he knew she was right. Armed with this crucial information, Raphael knew they had to act swiftly. He realized that Deborah's instincts had been right all along, and now it was time to confront their adversary head-on. Together, they prepared to tackle the challenges ahead, knowing that this battle wasn't just for the project, but for everything they stood for. Raphael and Deborah decided to join forces once again, combining their strategies. Raphael took charge of the legal side and handled communication with the media, while Deborah used her personal connections to rally support from the community. Together, they managed to expose the true motivations behind the complaint, and with the truth revealed, they neutralized the threat looming over the shelter. Despite the scare and the disagreements, the incident served as a powerful reminder for both of them of the importance of trust and mutual support, even during the most difficult times. The shelter finally opened its doors, and the project, which had nearly been destroyed, became a symbol of resilience and determination for everyone involved. After the opening, however, Deborah couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. The source of the complaint weighed heavily on her mind, and she felt compelled to understand who had tried to sabotage their efforts. While Raphael focused on the legal aspects, working with his lawyers to repair the damage, Deborah continued her investigation. She turned to the contacts she had made during her time on the streets, slowly piecing together the puzzle. One afternoon, while going through documents and messages, Deborah found the name of one of Raphael's former investors, Paulo Ferraz, a man who had repeatedly expressed dissatisfaction with Raphael's shift towards social causes. His name appeared frequently in conversations and connections that pointed to conflicting interests with the social project. Convinced that Paulo was behind the complaint, Deborah went straight to Raphael to confront him with the information. Upon hearing Paulo's name, Raphael felt a surge of frustration. Paulo had been one of the earliest investors in his real estate ventures, but he had always been against Raphael's involvement in social causes, viewing them as a distraction from their real profit potential. "I knew he wasn't happy, but I never thought Paulo would go this far," Raphael muttered, rubbing his temples as he tried to contain his anger. Determined to resolve the situation, Raphael called an emergency meeting with his partners and Paulo, eager to get to the bottom of the issue. The meeting was tense from the outset, with Paulo denying any direct involvement in the complaint. However, his defensive stance and inconsistent arguments made it clear that he was unhappy with the direction Raphael was taking. The other partners, although divided, also raised concerns about the potential financial impact the social project could have on the real estate empire. "Raphael, you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. This project is steering us away from what really matters: profit and growth. We can't afford to risk everything for a social experiment," Paulo said, his voice laced with disdain. Feeling the mounting pressure, Raphael knew he had to take a firm stance. He understood the social project was a risk, but he also knew it was necessary, not just for Deborah, but for himself and the people he wanted to help. The discussion escalated, and Raphael confronted Paulo, accusing him of sabotaging the project for personal gain. "Paulo, I've respected you as a business partner, but this has gone too far. You tried to destroy something I believe in, and I won't let that happen," Raphael said, his voice firm but tinged with disappointment. Paulo remained unyielding, insisting that his actions were meant to protect the company's interests and accusing Raphael of being reckless. The tension in the room grew, and Raphael was faced with a critical decision: keep Paulo as a partner and compromise the project, or sever ties and risk a significant financial loss. When Deborah learned of the confrontation, she felt conflicted. On one hand, she was grateful to Raphael for defending the project and being willing to sacrifice part of his business to continue. On the other, she felt guilty that Raphael was in such a difficult position because of her. Her fears and insecurities began to resurface, and she questioned whether she had pushed too hard, endangering Raphael's career, a man who had so much to lose. "Raphael, I never wanted you to have to go through this," Deborah said, her voice full of uncertainty as she spoke with him after the meeting. Raphael looked at her, trying to reassure her, though he knew the situation was delicate. "Deborah, it's not just for you. This is important to me too. We can't always take the easiest path just because it's safe. I believe in this, and I believe in you," he replied, taking her hands in his. Despite Raphael's reassurance, Deborah continued to battle her internal demons. She knew he was risking a great deal, and the guilt of seeing him in this situation was overwhelming. Even with Raphael's support, she couldn't shake the feeling that he might be sacrificing too much for something that might not succeed. The situation became even more complicated when other investors, seeing Paulo's position, began questioning Raphael's commitment to the real estate sector. Confidence in the empire Raphael had built began to waver, and rumors spread about a potential internal fracture. Raphael found himself needing to make a choice: either break ties with those who oppose the project and continue taking risks, or give in to the pressure and shut down the shelter to save his business. Raphael's choice was clear to him, though it was painful. He called another meeting with all the partners, and in a decisive gesture, announced his intention to buy out Paulo's stake in the company, removing him from the operation entirely. Raphael was willing to face the financial consequences in order to keep the social project alive and remain true to his convictions. "This is the path I've chosen. If it means I'll have to rebuild part of my empire, so be it," Raphael declared, his gaze steady as he looked at the partners gathered in the room. The atmosphere grew tense, but Raphael did not waver. He knew the consequences could be severe, but he was prepared to face them, with Deborah by his side. Seeing Raphael's determination, Deborah realized that she needed to confront her own insecurities. She committed herself to ensuring the project's success, not only to honor Raphael's sacrifice, but also to prove to herself that she was capable. Though the conflicts and revelations had tested the limits of both, Raphael and Deborah were more determined than ever to move forward together, overcoming the challenges and turning the social project into a success, no matter the cost. After weeks of intense negotiations and difficult decisions, Raphael, with Deborah's unwavering support, managed to turn the tide with his partners. After much dialogue and a direct appeal to the conscience of all involved, Raphael found a way to calm the tensions and restructure the business so that the social project could continue without fully compromising the real estate empire he had spent years building. The partners who had doubts about the future eventually accepted Raphael's terms, trusting in his leadership and vision. With the path finally clear, Raphael and Deborah looked ahead, united and ready to face whatever came next. They reopened the shelter with a memorable ceremony, attended by the local community, volunteers, and several of the individuals the center aimed to help. For Deborah, it was the culmination of all the sacrifices and hard work she and Raphael had put in to make this dream a reality. During the reopening ceremony, Deborah was invited to give a speech. As she stood before an attentive audience, she took the microphone with trembling hands, but her gaze was steady and resolute. When she began to speak, Deborah shared her story, the highs and lows of her life, from losing her mother to the time she spent living on the streets, and how reconnecting with Raphael had transformed her life. I know what it feels like to think the world has turned its back on you. I know what it's like to fight every day just to survive. But I also know what it's like to receive help, a simple act of kindness that changes everything. This place is more than a shelter, it's a second chance. And I'm here to say that everyone deserves that chance, Deborah said, her voice heavy with emotion. The audience remained silent, absorbing each word. Many were visibly moved, and Deborah could see tears in the eyes of some in attendance. Her speech not only gave voice to her personal journey, but also inspired others to get involved and contribute to the cause. The shelter had become more than just a social project. It had become a symbol of hope and resilience for the entire community. Watching Deborah speak, Raphael felt an overwhelming sense of pride. He knew that none of this would have been possible without her. After the speech, as Deborah stepped down from the makeshift stage, Raphael approached her and, without hesitation, embraced her tightly. In that moment, all the doubts and insecurities that had weighed on both of them seemed to vanish. "You were incredible," Raphael whispered into Deborah's ear, still holding her close. "I just told the truth," Deborah replied with a soft smile, her eyes glistening with unspoken emotions. With the energy of the moment still buzzing around them, Raphael realized it was time to take a step he had been contemplating for a long time. Taking Deborah's hands in his gaze sincere and full of emotion, he finally expressed what he had been feeling for so long. "Deborah, I want you to know that everything I've done has been because I believe in you, in us. I love you, and I want to build a future with you. Not just here, with this shelter, but in every part of my life," Raphael declared, his voice both firm and gentle. Deborah, surprised and overwhelmed by Raphael's words, felt her heart race. She had known these feelings existed between them for some time, but hearing Raphael confess his love so openly and sincerely was something she hadn't expected. "I love you too, Raphael," Deborah responded, the words flowing naturally, as if they were the most certain thing in the world. "I've always loved you." Raphael smiled, and in that instant, he made the proposal he had been carrying in his heart. He knelt gently in front of Deborah, pulling a small ring from his pocket, a gesture that made Deborah's eyes widen with surprise and emotion. "Deborah Santana, will you marry me? I want to spend every day of my life by your side, building not just this project, but a life together," Raphael asked, his voice filled with love. Deborah brought her hands to her face, feeling tears of joy slip down her cheeks. The crowd around them held their breath, all eyes focused on the couple, the air thick with emotion. "Yes, Raphael. I will. I do," Deborah exclaimed, her radiant smile lighting up the moment. Raphael stood up, slipping the ring onto Deborah's finger as the audience erupted into applause, celebrating their union. The moment was pure happiness, and the future before them, filled with promises and new possibilities, seemed to take shape right before their eyes. With their commitment sealed, Raphael and Deborah began not only planning the future of the shelter, but also their life together as husband and wife. Their relationship, once built on support and companionship, had blossomed into something deeper, with both of them drawing strength and renewed hope from each other's presence. However, as the days passed, Raphael began to notice something that concerned him. Deborah seemed more fatigued than usual, frequently complaining of pains she hadn't mentioned before. She, who had always been so full of energy and determination, now showed signs of exhaustion and discomfort. At first, Raphael thought it was simply the emotional toll of everything they had been through, but as the symptoms persisted, his concern grew. Deborah, ever the optimist, tried to downplay Raphael's worries. "It's probably just stress, Raphael. We've been through so much in such a short time," she would say, trying to ease his mind. But Raphael wasn't convinced. Refusing to leave anything to chance, he insisted that Deborah see a doctor and get some tests done. Although reluctant at first, Deborah eventually agreed, mainly to calm Raphael's nerves. However, as the consultations progressed, the medical suspicions began to point to something more serious, heightening Raphael's anxiety. A new weight settled on Raphael's shoulders as he feared losing Deborah just when they had finally found a path together. The tension between the joy of being engaged and the growing worry over Deborah's health created a sense of dread for Raphael. He found himself battling the fear that, after everything they had overcome, something beyond his control might tear them apart. As they waited for the results, Raphael tried to remain hopeful, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. He had never felt so helpless, building a future together, while facing the fear of what the medical tests might reveal, added a layer of uncertainty they hadn't been prepared for. With Raphael's unwavering support, Deborah remained hopeful, even in the face of this new challenge. Both of them understood that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it side by side. And so, amidst their plans and uncertainties, Raphael and Deborah continued their journey, guided by love and courage, in a world filled with possibilities and challenges yet to come. Months passed after the reopening of the shelter, and life for Raphael and Deborah settled into a rhythm of stability and renewed hope. The health concerns that had once weighed so heavily on Raphael's heart gradually gave way to relief and joy as the medical tests revealed that Deborah's symptoms were simply the result of stress and emotional exhaustion. She was in fact healthy. With Raphael's support, Deborah began to take better care of herself, and soon her vitality and energy returned, becoming part of their daily life once more. One peaceful morning, as Raphael prepared breakfast in the mansion's kitchen, Deborah walked in with an enigmatic smile on her face. She was holding a small pregnancy test in her hand. Raphael, noticing the special gleam in her eyes, felt a surge of curiosity. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. With a smile, Deborah extended the test toward him. Raphael's eyes widened as he saw the two unmistakable lines, confirming that Deborah was pregnant. The initial shock quickly turned into a wave of overwhelming happiness. Unable to hold back his tears, Raphael embraced Deborah tightly, his heart swelling with love. "We're going to be parents," he exclaimed, still processing the joyous news. "This is incredible," Deborah said, laughing through her own tears of happiness. She felt complete, filled with gratitude for the path that had led them to this moment. For them, the arrival of a baby symbolized a new beginning, a gift that celebrated all the battles they had overcome and the love that had blossomed even in the most difficult times. With the news of the pregnancy, the preparations for their wedding also began to intensify. Raphael and Deborah chose to have a simple but deeply meaningful ceremony. They decided to marry at the shelter itself, surrounded by the people they had helped and met throughout the social project. For them, that place represented not only their love, but also their commitment to transforming lives. On the day of the wedding, the shelter was beautifully decorated with white flowers and soft lights. Deborah walked down the improvised aisle in a simple white dress that radiated her beauty and serenity. Raphael, waiting at the altar, wore a smile that reflected all the happiness and gratitude he felt. As Deborah reached his side, Raphael took her hands, and the two exchanged glances that spoke volumes, saying more than words ever could. The ceremony was filled with emotion. Raphael and Deborah's vows were heartfelt, filled with promises of love, respect, and mutual support no matter what challenges the future held. When they finally exchanged rings, the warm applause of the guests echoed through the hall, and the couple sealed their commitment with a kiss, marking the beginning of their life together. A few months later, the big day arrived, the birth of their son, Enzo. The joy of holding their little one for the first time was indescribable. Enzo represented the culmination of everything they had fought for, a symbol of love, hope, and resilience. As Raphael cradled their newborn in his arms, he looked at Deborah, and in that moment, he knew that every challenge they had faced had led them exactly to where they were meant to be. Now parents, Raphael and Deborah reflected on their journeys. Both had come from pasts marked by loss and hardship, but each obstacle had shaped and prepared them for the moment they were living now. They were determined to continue helping others, expanding the social project, and creating new opportunities for those in need. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden of the mansion, watching the sunset with Enzo in their arms, the gentle breeze of the evening surrounding them, Raphael felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. The sight of his family, united and filled with love, was a gift he had never imagined he would have. He turned to Deborah, holding her gently, and they exchanged a smile that said it all. They had triumphed. "You know, Deborah, when I found you on that sidewalk, I never imagined we would be here today, together with a child in our arms," Raphael said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Life is full of surprises, Raphael, but what matters is how we choose to face them. And I thank the universe every day for giving me you and Enzo," Deborah replied, her eyes shining with gratitude. They sat in silence for a while, simply savoring the peace of that moment. With Enzo between them, Raphael and Deborah gazed toward the horizon, filled with hope for the future. They knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but together, they had the strength to overcome any obstacle. With hearts full of love and gratitude, they committed themselves to continue their journey not only as partners and parents, but also as agents of change, inspiring others to believe that no matter the circumstances, there is always a new opportunity to start again. And so, with Enzo in their arms, they faced the future with confidence, ready to write the next chapters of their lives, a future filled with love, purpose, and a profound sense of mission. The story of Raphael, Deborah, and Enzo was only beginning, and the best was yet to come. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories like this. Give it a like and comment below with your thoughts. See you in the next video.